to the Scoreboard. Happy Thursday to you. Oh, today's episode, yes, you already know, today's episode was recorded earlier in the day. We are not live on air right now, but it is Thursday when I'm recording this. So all the information that you are hearing is current as of the time of the recording. Hopefully nothing crazy happens between now and 5 o'clock. You never know, though. You really don't. We've gotten lucky over the past few days. Interesting day of sports yesterday, including some things going on in the world. A very sad incident in Washington, D.C., where a plane collided with a military helicopter, and apparently there are 14 people who were linked to the U.S. figure skating teams aboard the aircraft. I think it was reported earlier today that they are now moving from search and rescue to recovery. Unfortunately, it's feared that everybody aboard that plane did not make it out. So a very sad night last night for the figure skating community, for the world really, as the United States figure skating team suffers this tragedy in Washington, D.C. last night. They were just coming from a tournament in Wichita. It wasn't a tournament. It was a developmental camp, which followed the U.S. Figure Skating Championships from the weekend in Wichita. Here's the quote. U.S. Figure Skating can confirm that several members of our skating community were sadly aboard American Airlines Flight 503042, which collided with a helicopter yesterday evening in Washington, D.C. We are devastated by this unspeakable tragedy and hold the victims' families close in our hearts. The flight had 60 passengers, 4 crew members, and Army officials said 3 soldiers were aboard the helicopter. The airplane collided with the helicopter while attempting to land. The plane then ended up in the Potomac River, and there was a widespread search and rescue. Very unfortunate, very sad news in the sports world coming from yesterday. Well, we're not going to dwell on the sad news today. We have a lot that I want to get to, including the men's high school basketball season. It's been a pretty good season for a lot of the schools in the area. Some teams were in action yesterday and on Tuesday. So we got to make sure that we give some love to those schools in the area that are doing good. I'll tell you what, we talked a lot about West Iredell and the skid that they were on after starting the year 9-3. They got a big win against Ford High School on Tuesday. So we're going to spend a lot of time talking about high school basketball in the area. We're also going to talk about some things that are in the news. NASCAR back in the news, a bombshell that was dropped yesterday. TNT Sports and Max will be launching an exclusive NASCAR driver cam and audio experience. That's a double thumbs up from me if you're a NASCAR fan. If you're NASCAR itself, that is going to bring a lot more eyes to the sport. And I'll tell you what, just having other options for a broadcast, because when you think about football and basketball and what a lot of these streaming services have done recently, Monday Night Football, let's take Monday Night Football for example. ESPN broadcasts Monday Night Football. You can watch it either on ESPN, I believe most of them are also on ABC, or you can go on to ESPN's streaming services. When you go to the streaming service, there are other alternative broadcasts on the site, including the Manning cast, which we all know about. That one's available on like ESPN2 on your TV. But other ones like the Skycam, Amazon Prime has a few where they have somebody, I forget who the reporter is, but they have somebody come onto the broadcast every now and then and give you some inside stats, some advanced statistics for the game. and the camera angle is from behind. You can see the whole field. You have all 22 broadcasts for football where you can see the entire field, the way that they review film when they go back. Obviously, the teams that practice film review using the all 22 camera, they have that broadcast. But for NASCAR, for a long time, it was we just have what's on TV. Well, now with them getting into streaming, TNT Sports and Max have launched a alternative broadcast. Now, I'm not sure exactly if you're going to be hearing the normal broadcast coverage. I believe it's more for driver communications with their spotters and crew chiefs and things like that. But we'll see. We're going to talk about that a little bit more in depth later on in the program. Also, some NBA news. Adam Silver was on the Dan Patrick show recently and expressed that he is not against changing the NBA quarter lengths from 10 minutes or from 12 minutes to 10 minutes. He said that quite extensively, actually, when he was doing this interview on the Dan Patrick show. The reason being, they're the only professional basketball league that has 12-minute quarters. Everybody else is 10. So it makes a little bit of sense. We'll talk about that a little bit later on as well as getting you ready for the NASCAR Clash, which is coming up this weekend. You go to Bowman Gray Stadium. Now, a lot of you newer NASCAR fans have never seen a NASCAR race at Bowman Gray Stadium. It's because they haven't been there in quite some time. We're going to talk about that a little bit later on as well when we get into the NASCAR segment. But we are coming up on our first commercial break of the day. What we'll do is we'll go to break. When we come back, that's when we'll take our deep dive into the men's varsity high school basketball season. And like I said, there are a lot of schools in the area that have had really good years that we may be looking forward to playoff basketball coming up in their future. So don't go anywhere. I know you guys love hearing about these high school sports. We're going to take that first break of the day. And when we return, we're going to hop right into the high school men's basketball season. Some games to review, some upcoming games that we need to get you prepared for. Don't go anywhere, ladies and gentlemen. We're back after this. And welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to the Scoreboard. A reminder for you, today's episode was recorded at an earlier time. It is not 5 o'clock when I am speaking right now, but you guys are hearing this at 5 o'clock. We're going to talk about the high school basketball scene right now. I told you that's what we were going to get into when we return from break. Men's varsity basketball in the area, starting with the same school we always start with, Statesville Greyhounds. Now, the Greyhounds are in a little bit of a rut here. Not anything that we saw with what West Iredell was suffering. But after a 5-game winning streak for Statesville, they turned that around with a couple of important losses. 1 to North Lincoln, which we talked about recently, and 1 on Tuesday to East Lincoln. That was on the road, a 13-point victory for East Lincoln. That moved Statesville's conference record to 6-3. Now, remember, going into that game, we had a 4-way tie at the top of the 3A Western Foothills Conference. Right now, it's both of those Lincoln schools, North Lincoln and East Lincoln, that are 7-2 on the year, leading the 3A Western Foothills Conference. Behind them are Statesville High School and Hickory High School at 6-3. So only 1 game back of the lead in the conference. So still a long way to go. 4 games is still a long way to go. Yes, there's a lot that can happen. But Statesville actually has 5 games remaining. Some of the schools have 4, some have 5. I think there's a couple out there that have 6 games remaining on the regular season schedule as well. Coming up for Statesville, they have a big game at home against Ford High School. They have their final 2 home games of the year coming up this Friday and then early next week. The last home game in the regular season for Statesville is going to be a home game against West Iredell, who they beat earlier in January, 78-76. A very close game there. But coming up this Friday, which is tomorrow for Statesville, they play Ford High School at 7:30. Now, Ford High School has had a rough year. Overall, they're only 1-18. That one win that they had came against Cherryville High School, so a team that we're not all... I'm familiar with Cherryville personally because when I was playing football, we played Cherryville quite a bit, and baseball for that matter. But Ford High School playing them earlier in the year, that was the only win that they got. They're 0-9 in the conference. So for Statesville, you take care of business tomorrow, and you hope that North Lincoln and East Lincoln fall in the near future. You have no more head-to-head games against them. You do end the season against Hickory High School, which is going to be important because right now, as we just talked about, Hickory and Statesville are tied 6-3 within the conference. That could be a big tie-breaking game. Statesville actually won against Hickory 9 days ago with a 71-62 victory. Moving on from Statesville, we have South Iredell High School, who is struggling in their conference games. They have played 7 of them. They have lost all 7 of them, and the only other games that they've won were earlier in the year. Right now, South Iredell High School sits at 4-15. Like I just said, no wins in the conference right now. They are 0-7 in the 4A Greater Metro. I don't see playoffs in the future of this team, unfortunately, so maybe a good feel-good win coming at the end of the year would be just what they needed. 5 games remaining for South Iredell, with their next game coming up against Hickory Ridge High School tomorrow at 7:30. 3 home games remaining, and then they go on the road for the final 2 regular season games of the year. Does South Iredell, but a 4-15 record and an 0-7 conference record, that's tough. It really is. Moving on from South Iredell, we have West Iredell, and I told you earlier in the show, they may have turned their luck around. You play a team that's really had a bad year and try to get a win when you start to slump, and it could change things dramatically, and that's what West Iredell tried to do on Tuesday, as they beat Ford High School 72-60 to give them a win after losing, I believe it was 6 in a row. I don't have the number right in front of me, but after 6 consecutive losses, West Iredell finally off the schneid. They're getting the win. That puts them back over 500 with a 10-9 overall record, but the conference record is problematic for West Iredell. They are tied for next to last in the 3A Western Foothills with St. Stephen's. I don't see them finishing all that well in the conference, but maybe that overall record can help boost them as they come to the end of the regular season. They do have a tough game coming up on Friday. It'll be a home game against East Lincoln, one of those teams that is tied for the lead of the 3A Western Foothills. And they do play North Iredell, the leader of the 3A Western Foothills, later in the season. That'll be a couple of weeks into February when that game is played. But East Lincoln tomorrow at 7:30 for West Iredell as they look to continue to turn the season around after a really good start. And I know I sound like a broken record sometimes, but again, this is why starting the year off good is so important. If West Iredell started the year 500, they would be well below 500 now, and the season would be a loss. But starting 9-3, that really, really helped them out here as we get towards the end of the regular season. We also want to talk about North Iredell. The North Iredell Raiders most recently played St. Stephen's, and they get up to a nice 3-game winning streak here later in the season. Now, they're 7-2 overall with 5 games remaining, so if they win out, the best they'd be able to do is 12-12. But the good news for North Iredell is the conference record is not as bad as you might think. They are 4-5, but they're still within striking distance. They're not mathematically eliminated yet. And with 5 games remaining, you do play all of the teams ahead of you in the standings. You got North Lincoln coming up on Friday, Hickory High School, Statesville, and East Lincoln. All of those schools are currently ahead of North Iredell in the conference standings. So a very nice stretch here at the end of the year for North Iredell to see if they can claw their way back into playoff contention. Remember, they were not having a good year, and then all of a sudden they go on this 3-game winning streak, and they're right back in the mix. Coming up on Friday, they will be on the road against North Lincoln, which is going to be a tough environment to play in. But if they get that win, anything's going to be possible for them moving through the remainder of the season. Let's move into some schools that are a little farther south of the area we were just talking about, right up against Lake Norman. We'll talk about Lake Norman High School, the 7th best team in the state of North Carolina. The Wildcats have just been on another level this year. Most recently, they played A.L. Brown on Tuesday, getting an 87-50 win. That improves their point spread to plus 500 on the year. They have outscored their opponents, but just about 500 points on the year. And they're in the midst of a 7-game winning streak, which includes 7 in a row in the conference. They have not lost a conference game yet, has Lake Norman. And the schedule for them, it really doesn't get all that much harder. They're only playing conference games for the remainder of the season. The most important one being Mooresville to end the season, who also has a really, really good record. Everybody else in the 4A Greater Metro, their overall record is below 500. So it's Mooresville and Lake Norman, the class of the field. And then everybody else is below 500, starting with Hickory Ridge, who, yes, has a winning record in the conference at 4-3, but their overall record is 9-10, and it just gets worse from there. So a very interesting season in the conference, the class of it easily being Lake Norman, with Mooresville not far behind. But for Lake Norman, their next game is Friday. They play on the road against West Cabarrus with a 7:30 tip-off on that game. And the other team in the 4A Greater Metro that we have been looking at has been Mooresville High School. Now, on Tuesday, they played Hickory Ridge, a blowout win for Mooresville yet again, winning that one 74-55. Their most recent loss on the year was Lake Norman, which happened last week. They lost that one 99-71. But other than that, Mooresville High School has been on a tear, only losing non-conference games with that one conference loss to Lake Norman. They're one of the schools that only has 4 games remaining on the year, though, so you got to keep that into account. They're not going to be in action this coming Friday. Unlike most of the schools in the area, we'll have to wait for next week when they go on the road against South Iredell. Last but not least, I want to give you an update on Pine Lake Prep, my alma mater high school. They are 15-4 on the year, having an absolutely incredible season. 7-2 in the conference, and you would think at 7-2 they would be really good. They're actually 3rd within the conference. Lincoln Charter with that better overall record and Corvian Community with a better conference record are ahead of Pine Lake, who still has 5 games remaining on the season. They play Mountain Island Charter tomorrow at home at 7:30. We'll head to our next commercial break, halfway point here on the Scoreboard. When we return, we'll talk about some news in the sports world. Don't go anywhere. We're back after this. And welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. Happy Thursday to you. We're halfway through the Scoreboard here today. A reminder for you, this episode was recorded earlier in the day. So it's not live, but it is Thursday. So everything you're hearing is current. It is up to date. We had things happening yesterday. we're in a weird time in the sports world where football's not really over, but it kind of is. But at the same time, the general public is not really ready to turn their attention to college basketball, to NBA basketball, to hockey, things like that until after the Super Bowl. But these things are still going on. You know, the NHL season, well past the halfway point of the season. The NBA trade deadline is coming up in a couple of days, actually. Next week is going to be the NBA trade deadline. Yeah, next week, February the 6th. That's going to be, that's on a Thursday, 1 week from today. And there is things going on in the NBA. There is some news that's being made, and the Charlotte Hornets, once again, are in the news. Not for anything good, for injury news. Yeah, I know. You guys don't want the injury news, but we do have injury news. We already talked about Brandon Miller earlier this season. We found out he's going to be out for the remainder of the season. Not only have we lost Brandon Miller, but now it seems like for a little bit of time we will be without the star of this team, LaMelo Ball, who is being evaluated for a left ankle sprain. Now, apparently it's a grade 1 ankle sprain. He is only expected to miss a week, so that's good, but I hope they don't rush him back. There's really no reason to rush him back after the season that the Hornets have put together, and the season that they've put together is not good. It's not a good season. Excuse me. Currently 12-32 on the season. The final team in the playoffs is the Chicago Bulls at 20-28. Once again, I don't understand this recent trend over the past few years. We're coming up on a decade now of this almost, where the Western Conference compared to the Eastern Conference is stacked. I mean, you have regularly teams below 500 making the playoffs in the East. It's not a good look, which is why rumblings have been heard about the NBA possibly going to a just top 16 teams. We're not going to take the top 8 in the East, top 8 in the West, or I guess now it's the top 10 with the top 6 being locked in and then the play-in game. So maybe one day they go to the top 20 in the NBA. Overall standings are locked in, not the top 10 in each conference. Maybe. But the Hornets are, no matter how you shake it, no matter what conference you put them in, they're not a good team. There's not many teams that are worse than them actually this year. Currently, only 2 teams have a worse record than the Hornets, and 1 team has the same amount of wins, but a lot more losses. Somehow, though, in the last 10 games that the Hornets have played, they are 500, losing the last 2 that they've played. It's still tank season. Maybe we get lucky, get the number 1 pick. Cooper Flagg, welcome to Charlotte. Then you can really start trying to build. But hopefully the young players continue to develop. I mean, that's really all you could think. We're kind of in a holding pattern with the Hornets, the same way we were with the Panthers, which is please just show us a little bit of improvement. Just a little bit. That's all we're asking. Still yet to be seen. Still yet to be seen. So the Hornets without LaMelo Ball for at least a week due to a left ankle sprain. He stepped on LA forward Jared Vanderbilt's foot as he was backpedaling. That'll do it. One thing I never understood is these NBA players, they all have high top sneakers. They shouldn't be able to sprain the ankle that easily. I feel like we're always hearing about sprains. Tighten your shoes. Put some ankle braces on. How are you rolling your ankle like that? Oh, boy. Anyway, that's where we are with the Hornets. It's going to be tough. Another long season, which is going to be another long off season as well. Some other things going on around the world of sports. We talked about it a little bit at the beginning of the show. Adam Silver discussing the possibility of 10-minute quarters in the NBA during a recent interview on the Dan Patrick Show. So, since the NBA has been born, all games have been 48 minutes, 12 minutes per quarter. The international game, professional basketball leagues that are outside of the NBA, all for the most part, I think exclusively, run 10-minute quarters for a 40-minute game. And we all know the Olympics, we just did the Olympics, 10-minute quarters there. And the NCAA basketball, they have halves, but it's still the same amount of time. 20-minute halves, it's still a 40-minute game. So NBA Commissioner Adam Silver said on Wednesday that he likes the idea of shortening games to 40 minutes. Here's the quote. As we get more involved in global basketball, the NBA is the only league that plays 48 minutes. And I am a fan of 4 10-minute quarters. I'm not sure that many others are. Putting aside what it means for records and things like that, yeah, I think that a 2-hour format for an NBA game is more consistent with modern television habits. Now, this isn't a decision that he's making because people don't want to watch a 48-minute basketball game anymore. This is, in my opinion, the television rights, the TV rights, and the networks. NBA games have been averaging over the past 15 seasons 2 hours and 15 minutes. If you take away 8 minutes of game time, that translates to probably a little more than 15 minutes of broadcast time, which would put you in that 2-hour block. It's something that the TV networks would love because you say, hey, these are your 2 hours. Now we know where we can schedule the rest of things. It's just a little easier rather than having a 2-hour and 15-minute average game time. You're probably going to extend the broadcast to that 2-hour and 30-minute mark so that you can do a little bit of post-game coverage as well. But hey, it seems like change in the NBA is imminent. It's something that the NBA, along with every other league that's not the NBA, that's not the NFL, has seen, and that is a decline in the ratings. I don't think that shortening the game has anything to do with the ratings the way that it did in baseball, where they added the pitch clock to shorten the game. That was because people said the game was too long. I don't think this is what it is for the NBA. I really, truly believe it's more of a request, or not a request, but the networks are probably driving this, as well as, he said, the international game only being 40 minutes versus 48 minutes. We're going to our final commercial break of the day, ladies and gentlemen. Don't go anywhere. We still got a good one for you. We're going to talk a little NASCAR on the other side of the break, so don't go anywhere. We're back after this. And welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. It is the final segment here on the Scoreboard on this beautiful Thursday. Man, the weather's really turned around on us, huh? It's nice and warm outside, short sleeves, short t-shirts, shorts, everything short. It's beautiful out. I miss the cold. I do. Don't be mad at me. I miss the cold. Anyway, we have gone over quite a bit today. We had a lot of high school basketball talk as we near the end of the season. We got into some NBA discussion. There's some possible changes coming to the NBA, shortened quarters. Does anybody want that? Is that something people have been requesting? I don't know. Maybe it is. Maybe it is. And now we want to pivot to NASCAR as we get closer and closer to the clash at Bowman Gray. No, it's not the clash at Daytona. It's the Clash at Bowman Gray, unfortunately. Now, it is going to be a fun event, in my opinion. I'm looking forward to it. I am. We haven't seen cars on the track since November. We had a whole off season go through, and we had some driver changes, things like that. But the first time we see the cars on the track is always a fun time. Now, the race itself, I'll call it the feature, is going to be 200 laps. 200 laps at 8 p.m. That is when that one's going to start. Now, at 6 o'clock on Sunday, there is a last chance qualifying race. The reason it's called the last chance is because on Saturday, starting at 6 o'clock, there are going to be cars on the racetrack. You have a practice and a qualifying with 3 different groups. And then we have 4 25-lap heat races to determine starting orders, things like that. And then on Sunday, you have your last chance qualifier, which is going to be a race to see who can be the last drivers to get into the Clash. Now, we haven't seen Bowman Gray used in NASCAR in quite some time. It's a track that is used, though. It's one of those hometown tracks, hometown short tracks. That NASCAR has, and they used to go there all the time back in the day. But recently, we haven't seen cars at Bowman Gray Stadium. I am excited for this, reluctantly excited. I mean, I don't really know how to explain it. Like, I think it's cool. I do. I like the idea to move away from the West Coast for the Clash, come to a spot where NASCAR is really born in North Carolina. So I think it's a good idea. But at the same time, I yearn for the days of speed weeks and preseason thunder at Daytona and all of the pole sitters from last year. You guys get to be in the Clash at Daytona. It's going to be 50 laps or 20 laps, 50 miles, whatever it is. We're going to have some fun. I yearn for those days. I do miss it. And I do think something is missing. I don't know what it is when it comes to the beginning of the season with NASCAR. Like, the duels are exciting. The Daytona 500 is exciting. The lead up to it is exciting. I just wish that we had more in speed weeks, because now it's really just, hey, the 24 happened and now we got to wait for the duels at Daytona. But nonetheless, we are moving on to a 2025 NASCAR season with no changes in the racing or the car or the points format, which is fine. We'll see how it goes this year. One thing that was announced recently is this, and I brought this up at the beginning of the program. TNT Sports and Max will be launching an exclusive NASCAR driver cam and audio experience. So, starting with the Cookout Clash this Sunday, the NASCAR driver cam on Max will offer users the most comprehensive access inside each driver's car, up to 40 drivers each race, including a layered audio mix of scanner team radios and ambient car noises, all synced up with a 1080p driver cam feed on supported drivers. At the launch, fans will be able to choose between individual driver cams or 2 preset multi-view stream options featuring 4 drivers each, chosen based on the most compelling matchups and storylines of the week. Now, when they say matchups, you got to remember TNT introduced this in-season NASCAR tournament that we're going to have this year, where it's going to be a bracket and it's going to be head-to-head, and it all culminates with the end of the TNT broadcast to crown an in-season champion. Interesting. It's the first time they've ever done it, and these are all going to be part of the TNT broadcast, which, it's going to be interesting. We haven't had that happen before. I believe the final race of that segment takes place at Indy, because that's the last one that TNT will be broadcasting. You also have the Prime Video broadcast this year. Yes, the Coca-Cola 600, one of the biggest races of the year, a crown jewel event in NASCAR, is not going to be able to be seen on cable television. It's going to be on Amazon Prime. I don't know about that one. If I was NASCAR, I probably would have pushed for Fox Sports to continue to cover the Coca-Cola 600, and then you can move into streaming, maybe push everything back a week. But I know contracts, all that stuff, yada, yada. I get it. But this is going to be interesting. I'm excited, and I'm probably going to check out the alternate broadcast on TNT. It sounds like as the year goes on, there's going to be more things that you can choose from. I'd love to be able to do a 4-screen of 4 drivers of my choice. Man, imagine if we had that last year during Talladega when everybody was 4 wide and you could watch an alternate stream where you could just ride along with somebody in traffic. Man, exhilarating. Ride with Josh Berry as he flips wildly down the backstretch at Daytona. That's going to be a lot of fun for the super speedway races and for the short tracks as well. You're going to see how physical a short track race is because you'll be able to. And I know we see the driver cam a lot during the broadcast, but this is a feed solely dedicated to onboard cameras. There's going to be no broadcast cameras around the track. It's just going to be the onboard cameras, which I think is going to be a ton of fun. As we get into the end of the program, one thing that we always do, let's talk about some things that happen on this day in sports history. Let's go ahead and start with 2022 because it was on this day in the AFC Championship at Arrowhead in Kansas City. The Cincinnati Bengals ended up beating the Kansas City Chiefs 27-24 in overtime. And as we know, they went on to lose in the Super Bowl to the Rams. That was a great game. And it was a loss for the Chiefs. Who would have thought? Who would have thought? Let's see. On this day, let's go with something from the 90s here. It was on this day in 1996 that future Hall of Famer Magic Johnson came out of a 5-year retirement. LA won 128-118 over Golden State at the Great Western Forum. In his return, Johnson had 19 points, 8 rebounds, and 10 assists. 1994, the Cowboys defeated the Buffalo Bills in the Super Bowl 30-13. Part of that 4 consecutive year Super Bowl loss streak. Man, that's a tough one if you're a Bills fan. And now you don't get to go back this year. I'm sorry, we won't talk about it. 1990, Wayne Gretzky sets an NHL record by scoring his 100th point of the season for the 11th straight season. 11 consecutive years with 100 or more points. Man, I love those Wayne Gretzky stats because all of them feel like video game stats. Like they're not actually real. Like you can't do that in real life. Maybe not anymore, but at one point you were definitely able to. 1958, MLB Commissioner Ford Frick announced that players and coaches, rather than fans, will vote on the selections for the All-Star Game. It then went back to a fan vote in 1970. Now let's see what are the oldest things that we have. 1924, Great Britain clinched the inaugural Olympics curling gold medal with a 46-4 win over France. How about that? 1924, curling. Who would have thought? Thanks everyone for tuning into the program today. I appreciate each and every one of you for tuning in and listening. Until tomorrow, have a great night, everyone.